Hi readers, me here. And earlier this week I said I was going to do a Father's Day video, way early Father's Day video, but I'm going to push that back a week or so because it is time for my April reading recap. I'm done reading the books I'm going to read for April. I'm currently reading a book right now, but I won't finish it until 1st or 2nd of May. So, this month, after book 2, I decided to kind of go with a witchy theme for, I thought the whole month, but it ended up being about a fortnight when I began to get burned out. So I broke it up a little bit. Anywho, I hope you'll come along with me on my April reading journey. Let's begin. Oh, I did find it was very fun to gather all these books with the witchy theme, and I might do more of that in the future. Probably not for May. One of the things I want to focus more on in May is doing more actual book reviews, longer form book reviews, because I feel that that's something I want to do and I'm not doing enough on it. Anywho, the first book I read this month was This Spells Disaster by Tori Martin. I've had this every once in a while. I'll get on a romance kick and I'll buy half a dozen romance books at the Barnes & Noble. This was a fun, fake dating, queer romance, and there was a theme throughout this of underestimating one's own self and talent. And this theme pops up not only in this book, but throughout the rest of the month, and I keep noticing it. Morgan, the main character in this, totally underestimates her own abilities, and really, that was my main takeaway from this. Really cute, fun book. Now, I hadn't yet decided to do Witchy Month, so I went next with something completely the opposite of This Spells Disaster, and that is Mary, An Awakening of Terror. Mary was a wild ride, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. This is kind of a, first of all, there's an unreliable narrator, and that narrator is Mary. I love an unreliable narrator. I love when they're lying to themselves and to you. And this is kind of, it has to do with a cult and a woman getting revenge. Kind of like Carrie. Only not as fiery. So after I read Mary, then I really needed to lighten things back up again, and I chose Payback's a Witch, #1 in the Thistle Grove series by Lana Harper. Again, this is another book. I've had like 3 or 4 of these books on my shelves for months, and I finally got around to reading this. I loved this one. This one and the whole series had much darker tones than This Spells Disaster, which is by a different author, and I liked that. I like the mix of romance and magic and darkness, all wrapped into one. I like it something where there's good and bad. This series, and this book is where I first realized it, deals a lot with family expectations, or what you perceive to be your family's expectations. And again, Emmy, in this one, she underestimated her own self and her own talent. And I had such a great time with this book, I highly recommend it in the series, by the way, that I decided I want to read about witches more. So that's when I came up with the idea of Witchy Month. From there, I went to book 2 in the series, From Bad to Cursed. This one, again, sorry, I had made myself notes and then I got lost. Again, family expectations. And when the main character, Isadora, finally speaks to her mother and tells her, this is what I want to do. I don't want to continue on in the family business. I want to do X. She realizes that she had made things so much worse in her head than they were in reality. And don't we all do that? And her mother didn't react at all the way she expected her to. So that's going to pop up again. That not telling makes it worse is going to pop up again later on in the series. Next up, I did a reread of Alice Hoffman's Practical Magic, and I loved it. Although, I forget how old I was when I read this originally, but 25 or some odd years later, this book hit a lot differently. And a lot of it has to do with experience, life experience, and I also discovered that there were 3 other books in the series, and I had not realized that. I knew there was one other, but I had not been interested at the time. But, you know, I've talked a little bit about family expectations and family legacy, and Alice Hoffman, right in here, in her intro, says it better than I ever could. Many of us know what it's like to try to escape a family legacy of one sort or another, only to discover that in the long run, we carry our heritage with us, no matter how far we might run. So, that family legacy, family expectation is going to continue throughout this month. The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson did not quite work for me. I read it, I didn't have any problem reading it, but I did not have the kind of fun I did with Practical Magic or the Lana Harper series. It just did not bring me that joy that I look for when I read. It was fine. And if this is something that you enjoy, please don't listen to me. But there is allegedly a second book coming out in this series. I won't run after and get it. I've got too many books, and also too much else to read. But there's a cult in here too. There's a prophet. There is a curse. So, you know, it could be the time that I read it. So, after that, I needed to go back to Thistle Grove, so I went back in a spell. The main character in this one was Nineve Blackmore. Anywho, she does a lot of label dropping, brand name label dropping in this, but that was part of that character. She does so much that I actually had to forcibly stop myself from buying this Tom Ford perfume, which I've never smelled, and I always have to smell a perfume before I buy it. But anywho, this one, keeping secrets, is another big thing. And by keeping the secret, she makes things worse and worse and worse for her until she's forced to finally tell somebody, and then they make it all better. So, but you know what? It wouldn't be a book if it didn't have any tension or a climax. So, I mean, but I think the moral of the story is, don't keep secrets, and you can't outrun your legacy. The 4th book I read, this is when I began to suspect that I was getting tired of reading about witches back to back to back. That was In Charm's Way. This was my least favorite, and I'm not sure why. Again, I think that it was because, like I said, it was because I think I was just getting burnout. And so I've learned my lesson on that. I need to vary my books and read different genres and different vibes. Otherwise, I can't read all romance. I can't read all horror. I can't read all anything. So, and it really, like, I'm going back and I'm looking at things that I highlighted and I'm like, this seems great. I should probably just split it up a little bit. All that said, there is one thing in this book that I absolutely adore, and that is a betrayal, a lover's betrayal. When it happens, I'm like, yes, I was rooting for that. And so that lifted me back up, even though I was beginning to feel a little, I guess you would call it burnout. So when I was checking to see if I was experiencing burnout, I read these 2 books. Nora Roberts' Dance Upon the Air and Heaven and Earth. I've read these both more times than I can count. and I struggled to get through these. I was distracted. There was some shit going on in the world around this time too. That could have also contributed to my distraction. Because I do pay attention to world events, but I even struggled to get through those books, which I loved, and I knew I loved. So, at that point, I was like, you know what? Let's stop the witchy theme for now. It has been fun. But I think if I do, again, another themed month, I'm going to split it up where, a book a week maybe, or something like that. So, the next book I chose was Darling Girls, and I tore through this book. I love this so much, that's when I knew that it wasn't the books I was reading, it was me. And this broke me out of that rut, I guess you'd call it. I adored this book. I highly recommend it. It is twisty. It is a mystery. And I just really like the characters. I know what it was. So each of the characters had something going on like in the background that made me really anxious because I'm like, keeping secrets. That theme came up again. And so I really enjoyed that anxiety that it gave me. I don't get scared anymore by books. I wish that I could, but the best I ever get is anxious. Next up, this book for me was really just okay. I enjoyed it. I didn't really like the characters the way I like the characters in Darling Girls. It was twisty. The author played with the timeline. Decent mystery. There were some things that I guessed. But if you like a good kind of thriller, this is a good read. But I think also coming on the heels of Darling Girls, it had some high shoes to fill. Next up, again a book I was conflicted about, but the more I think about it, the more I wonder if that's the purpose. So that was Eliza Clark's Penance. This is a book within a book. In Penance, it is the story of a journalist has written a definitive account of this crime committed by 3 girls. Those 3 girls set fire to their classmate, and some go to jail, and some don't go to jail as long. Anywho, so part of this book is the author telling the story from an outsider's perspective, telling you facts and history of the town and history of ghosts and all this kind of thing. And that happens at the beginning. And then it goes on to the author telling the story based on interviews he had with either the girls or their families or their mothers. And then at the end, you find out there's a scandal because the people that he interviewed say he's made some stuff up or embellished it. And when I was reading this, when it was him, I was kind of bored. But when it got into the girls' chapters, the chapters where he embellished the story, I was not bored. I fell into it. I was enraptured, enthralled, whatever. And so part of me wonders, is that part of the point? Did the author draw such a stark contrast for that very reason, to see, as part of the plot? Anywho, next up, I really got thrown for a loop week before last, I guess. Sophie Kinsella, who my mother and I and my sister all loved as an author when we were kind of growing up together, announced that she was diagnosed with glioblastoma in 2022. I spoke about this on another video. Glioblastoma is the same brain cancer that killed my mother, and it just really hit me hard. So I decided to read Can You Keep a Secret by Sophie Kinsella. I think I had read it before, not sure. And I adored it. It was so fun. I love her main female characters. They always, I've said this before, they always remind me of like Elle from Legally Blonde. They're a little bit ditzy, but they're really a strong character. And I found this in this case as well. But I unintentionally went with that keeping secret theme that I spoke about earlier. Finally, I was like, what is it? I thought I remembered that, I thought it had been too long between these two books, and then I remembered I tried to read Shogun, but it just got grueling, and I DNF'd it like 421 or something like that. Final book of April. I went back to Practical Magic, and I'm really glad that I did this with such space between it, because I loved the rules of magic. They talk about, this is the story of the aunts from Practical Magic. This is Franny and Jet and a brother that I didn't know they had. And it's just a beautiful, interesting story. They know about this curse that, that kills everybody that they love. And I guess one of the points that she seems to be making to me throughout it is that we all lose everyone we love at some point at some point or another. That's just life. Anywho, so that is it for me and my reading month. I think that was 15 books that I read, even more that I tried to read. But I am starting May with a kind of dark book. It is going a little bit slower right now than I would have liked, but it is starting to pick up. Stephen King gave it high praise, so I'm gonna push forward. It's not like Shogun. I just have to slow down and let myself fall into the story. Anywho, that is it for me. I can't wait to see what May brings in terms of reading. I'd love to hear about your April in books, and if you've got any comments, drop them down below. Happy reading!